My goal here on Honey I'm Home and inside the Happy Heart Academy is to help you live from your heart, not your hurt. Is help you to put your heart back out there on the line. But prior to putting your heart back out there on the line, you have to learn how to make yourself happy single. You got to learn how to fill your own cup. So you're not coming from a place of hurt. You're not coming from a place of need, but you coming from a place of wanting to give. You're not trying to go into your next relationship because you're in a lack of something. You're going into your next relationship because you want to give all of this joy and happiness within your own heart, within your mind, to help someone else, encourage them, to lift them up. What is up, my dear friends, and welcome back to another episode of Honey I'm Home. I am your host and relationship coach, Tylerjoestratton, and today we are going to be talking about the 5 reasons why relationships fall apart. You see, sometimes we have to know what we don't want in order to know what we do want, or sometimes we have to understand what doesn't work so we don't do those things in our life and relationships so that we can get a different result each and every time. You see, I think there's power. I oftentimes come across and speak to you all about, the things that you should be doing. But I also think that the things that you shouldn't be doing are just as important because awareness is key. And if you're doing these 5 things, then ultimately you can kind of begin to understand why your relationship isn't as successful as you want it to be. And if you're not currently in a relationship, cool. At least you know some foundational principles that will stop you from having a successful relationship, depending on your definition of success in that relationship. This will help you to make sure that you're not doing these very things because, hey, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you want to begin to experience a greater relationship, more intimacy, a higher quality relationship, you got to understand the 5 reasons why relationships fall apart. Because like I said, sometimes you just got to understand what doesn't work in order to know what to do. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we dive into that, my dear friends, thank you all for those of you who have tuned into this new journey with me. I do not take that lightly whatsoever. We went from the Happy Heart Academy podcast to the Honey I'm Home podcast, and it's still a relationship podcast, but we're going to be talking about all things relationships, not just, how to overcome heartbreak. But once again, there's over 150 plus different episodes that you can tune into that can help you create happiness after heartbreak. Plus, you can go over to happyheartacademy.com/happiness after heartbreak to receive my free masterclass on the 3 steps that you can begin to take in order to move on and reclaim your life after you go through heartbreak and are experiencing grief. So if you're grieving a loss, this masterclass is going to help you. It's going to help you understand the 3 things that oftentimes keep you the most stuck. These are the very obstacles that we believe or that we face time and time again that stop us from reaching a greater amount of happiness and success in our life and relationships. You're also going to get the 3 steps that I would tell you to focus in on so that you can begin to propel and move your life forward toward whatever it is that you're after during this heartbreak period. But the end result is you're going to know the knowledge, skill set, and ability that you can begin to adapt into your own life that's going to help you win in your life and relationships moving forward. But once again, you can go ahead and check that out in the show notes below, or check that out by going to happyheartacademy.com/happiness after heartbreak to get that free masterclass. Now on to today's episode where we're going to be talking about 5 reasons why relationships fail. My dear friends, today is a day in which I'm going to help you understand what not to do, simply because I think that's just as important. When I think about my own relationship and my own marriage, I got to understand what my wife doesn't like, and I got to make sure that I try to stop doing those things to annoy her or that could cause, any type of problems in our marriage and relationship. Understanding what your person doesn't want you to do can sometimes help you win in that relationship. There is a give and take to all things. So depending on what it is, I'm not saying for you to change yourself, but partially a relationship is about giving and taking, giving up some of you, changing some of you in order to adapt in that relationship. Too many people have this broken mentality that I'm not changing for anybody. Well, my wife is worth changing for. I believe that. But right now during your singleness, I want you to understand that, you know what? You don't need to change for anybody. You shouldn't be changing for anybody. You should be changing only for you. You should be really working on you so that you can attract a better quality partner. Because like I've talked about on my Threads feed, if you guys are not familiar with me on Threads, I posted a comment the last week that basically said that, being single is not normal. And it's really not. Being single isn't normal. And I don't want you to stay single for the rest of your life. I want you to get back out there, put your heart back out there, love deeper, love harder, love more in alignment to the love that you really want. My goal here on Honey, I'm Home and inside the Happy Heart Academy is to help you live from your heart, not your hurt. Is help you to put your heart back out there on the line. But prior to putting your heart back out there on the line, you have to learn how to make yourself happy single. You got to learn how to fill your own cup. So you're not coming from a place of hurt. You're not coming from a place of need, but you coming from a place of wanting to give. You're not trying to go into your next relationship because you're in a lack of something. You're going into your next relationship because you want to give all of this joy and happiness within your own heart, within your mind, to help someone else, encourage them, to lift them up. You see, we need to go into our next relationship thinking, I want to go into it serving more, loving more, leading more, giving more, expressing more, talking more, communicating more. I want to give more than I have ever given before. And that can only happen when you start to give to yourself. So my mission here is to help you overcome all of the obstacles that are stopping you from achieving a better relationship with yourself, improve that relationship with yourself so that you can give more to others. That's what I've done. That's why I've created the Happy Heart Academy. And this is what I've learned in the past 7 years of my relationship and in many relationships and couples that I've coached along the way were the 5 main reasons why relationships fall apart. And the first one, and this is not even the first one, actually, this is the overarching problem that we all have, which is everything rises and falls on leadership and communication. Your lack thereof communication is part of the reason why the relationship falls apart. Because one person, most of the time, mainly the woman, wants to communicate too much, where the man wants to under-communicate and tuck all of his feelings away because he doesn't know how to communicate his emotions or his feelings. This is pretty normal overall for most men and most women. However, outside of the communication problem that we can begin to talk about, if that's something you're interested in, I want to give you 5 other ideas outside of the communication problem that can help you to bring awareness to why some relationships end up falling apart. And the first reason I want to bring up is people oftentimes avoid personal responsibility. So I believe that responsibility oftentimes falls on the person who's most aware in the relationship. If you know that there's a problem and you're the problem and you're aware of that problem, you need to take responsibility for that problem. You see, I believe that only focusing on what your partner is doing is the reason why the relationship is falling apart. You're not taking into account what you're doing or not doing. You're focusing solely on what your partner is either doing that you don't like them to do, or you're focusing on what they aren't doing that you want them to do more of. And all of this is taking your focus off of you and putting it onto them. You've taken yourself out of the equation. In a relationship, it takes 2. And that means that you can't just look at them and recognize them as the sole problem. You got to stop avoiding personal responsibility. Now, this was hard for me because first things first is I had to understand what my problems were. So I had to become more aware. And I became more aware by asking my wife, what are some of the things that you struggle that I bring to the table? And then I also started to meditate. So instead of avoiding your personal responsibility, taking responsibility of your own problems that you bring to the relationship, thinking that, hey, maybe I'm contributing to the problem. Maybe I'm not a good listener. Maybe I'm not a good communicator. Maybe I'm not a great arguer. Maybe I don't know how to deal with conflict. Whatever those specific problems are, the 2 ways that you can become aware of your specific problem is by asking someone about that, meaning your partner, or meditating and finding it within yourself to come up with those answers that you're seeking. Meditation is the key to awareness. If you want to unlock awareness, you got to ask questions and you got to sit in silence and solitude. So there might be some personal responsibilities that you're avoiding. And what's causing the relationship to fall apart ultimately is that you're doing too much focusing on what your partner is or is not doing. what they are doing or are not doing. And the focus is outward. Anytime that you focus on something outside of yourself, that's a problem in my eyes, because the problem is not out there. If I have a problem, where is the problem? The problem is always internally. When I have a problem, I have to understand that I need to put a mirror right in front of me and realize that I am the problem. It's not someone, because even though that, your significant other, your partner, your future partner your ex might be acting a certain way and you didn't like that, or they weren't acting a certain way and you didn't like that, the problem wasn't out there. The problem out there was that it triggered a problem within yourself. So you got to be aware of those specific problems that you're trying to avoid. So instead of avoiding them, I'm just asking you to come up with the awareness. How do you come up with awareness? Once again, I said, ask about it, ask other people about it, or sit in solitude and silence, or what I like to call meditation. So that's the first reason why most relationships fall apart, is because they avoid taking personal responsibility. They stop looking at themselves and they only look at their partner. I cannot continue to judge my wife based upon her eating habits if I'm not taking responsibility for my own eating habits. That's just a quick example in everyday living in life. So I've got to make sure I do a self check-in before I try to check in and change her. I got to make sure I'm checking in and changing myself. That's a part of leadership. That's a part of leading your home. That's a part of owning up. That's a part of responsibility. That's a part of the ownership that you need to take as the individual who is most aware of the problem. Responsibility falls on the person who is most aware. Number two is oftentimes comes from blaming each other. Once again, in avoiding your responsibility, in that moment, you're blaming the other person. Let me make you aware of what blaming the other person can do to that relationship. Blaming each other will cause you to find it very hard to see the best in one another, because all that you can focus in on and see is their worst. Blaming is a matter of, you're not blaming them for the good things, you're blaming them for the bad things. If you're blaming them for the good things, that would be being thankful or grateful, and you wouldn't be in a failed or failing relationship, because you wouldn't be calling it blaming, you'd be calling it being thankful and being grateful. So blaming is basically pointing out all of their problems, right? It's still, the focus is off of you. Are you catching my gif just yet? The problem why most relationships fail is because you're focusing on everything outside of you. You're not taking care of you. You lost yourself in that relationship. Everything that you are is that relationship. I need you to start to build quality time back into your day to take care of you, to check in with you, to make sure that you are being taken care of. But when you sit down and you blame each other, what oftentimes will happen is you stop seeing the best in them. You're only focusing on the worst. And when you go to work, or you talk to friends, or you talk to someone you trust, you end up throwing up on them all of the problems. And then that person who's listening oftentimes validates the problems that you're currently experiencing, which elevates the problem at home, which oftentimes causes more failed relationships. Your relationship is failing because you're blaming them for being the problem. You're taking your eyes off of you and you're focusing on them. That's pretty self-explanatory, but I still think it's important and it needs to be talked about, because you got to stop taking blame. You got to stop blaming them for this problem. Even if you know that they are the problem, like let's just say, for example, a quick problem is the nuisance of like not picking up after yourself, right? And they're always talking to you about how you don't pick up after yourself. Well, once again, who's actually the problem? Well, the problem really is that the person is not picking up after themselves, right? So it's them. They are the problem, technically, but that doesn't solve anything. You telling them to go pick up after themselves is not going to help the situation. So we'll talk about what you do. The third big idea here is you continue to avoid taking ownership of resolving conflict. You continue to avoid taking ownership of the conflict at hand. So what does that mean? Well, many times when relationships, when couples get into any type of conflict or argument, what oftentimes happens is we keep score. We keep score and we stop talking openly and honestly about the unresolved conflict at hand. And now this begins to build resentment, and it starts to destroy the relationship. You got to stop avoiding the elephant in the room. You got to learn how to communicate openly and honestly. I think that's one thing I'm very good at as a man, is being very open and honest in my communication, and that's helped me to build a really incredible relationship with my wife. My ability to be so open and vulnerable, even when it's scary, has helped me to cultivate a greater amount of love for myself and my wife. And the reason why relationships fall apart is because they avoid fixing the conflict. They avoid the deeper conversation. They avoid sharing their truth, and they only share half of the truth, or they expect that their partner knows how they're feeling, what they're thinking, or what they want without communicating it to them. I've always told my wife that I'm not a mind reader. I can't read your mind, and I don't understand emotion very well. I hardly understand my own emotions. So for you to believe that I can understand what you're feeling without you communicating it to me, this relationship might fall apart a little bit. You know, anytime that you blame someone else for not, understanding you, how hard has it been for you to understand you? How hard has it been for you to work through your emotions, to understand what emotion you're feeling, and then to release that emotion? Yet you treat your partner as if they live in your head and that they understand everything that you're thinking and feeling, and you just assume that they know, and they really don't. And then you break out into an argument, and then you keep score, and you oftentimes stop communicating with them openly and honestly because of the way that they're reacting. Well, every time I open up to them, they blow up at me. They blow up on me. They speak poorly. They start to name call. Things get too loud. Things like start to happen that we don't want to have happen. Aggression, anger, frustration, hurt, words that shouldn't be said are being said. So you avoid trying to resolve that conflict because you feel like it's better to say nothing than to go through that battle. And I'm challenging you to go through that battle. I'm challenging you to open yourself up to truth and to effective, honest, and open conversation. I'm challenging you to lead your home, lead your family, lead yourself, lead your loved ones by trying to be more open and more honest in your communication. And number 4, the fourth big idea here on why most relationships fail is because you oftentimes stop prioritizing one another. My wife and I have been together for 7+ years now, happily 7+ years. We have dealt with very little conflict in those 7 years. So much little conflict that I'm really not sure what our conflict was, because I just don't hold on to it, because it's like I'm trying to think about how we are going to be together forever and reminding myself like, hey, we're a team. So even in this moment of argument, we want the same thing, which is I want to be with you, you want to be with me. So we need to make sure that we're on the same team fighting for the same reason, because it's not me versus you. It's us versus the problem. It's, I see a problem, and most of our problems are outside problems. I mean, it's like, it's my family or her family, and it's like causing us problems, and we're like, we're arguing, but it's not even about, us, it's about our families, how it really works. So anyway, on top of that is we don't prioritize each other because we focus on our needs rather than their needs, wants, hopes, dreams, and desires, right? We focus on growing our careers, raising our kids. We focus on, working out. We focus on what we want rather than what they want. And so we distance ourselves. We think that we're taking care of them because we're going to work and doing our due diligence. We think that we're taking care of them by just going to eat dinner at a table close to one another, and we turn on Netflix and we part our ways. We think that we're interacting with one another when we're in close proximity scrolling on our phones, and that should be enough. Listen, that is not enough. We can't continue to sustain a long-term, loving, intimate, passionate relationship with a person if we're not prioritizing each other's needs, wants, and desires, hopes, dreams, and fulfillment, or we will go seek it elsewhere. That's the scary part. If you're not showing up as your most of the time as your best self, meaning in a loving, present way, your partner will try to go find it elsewhere. They might cheat, they might not. But I'm promising you, the lack of attention and appreciation, presence and love that you stopped holding to them, stop giving them gifts, stop showing up for their love languages, stop prioritizing them, is going to be the reason why you guys continue to very slowly, over time, disconnect. And that's why you don't see it, is because it's a very slow progression. It might take years before you start to actually see the, wait, we're becoming distant. I thought this was normal and you were still happy, but you haven't checked in with them to ask them, hey, are you happy? Am I fulfilling you? Am I causing more lack in your life and you want more and I'm not giving it and I didn't know that I wasn't giving it because you never said anything? So we got to make sure that we start to prioritize each other, finding new and exciting ways to be spontaneous, fun, joyful, happy, connected, present with one another. And the last big idea here, my friend, is this. We take each other for granted. Now, I know that I have done this in my past 7 years, and I'm sure that you have too. But you, in order to build a high quality, loving, joyful relationship with someone in the future, you've got to make sure you stop taking them for granted. Taking them for granted is overlooking them. Stop saying the small thank yous. I appreciate you. I love you. I'm glad you're here. Reminding them how grateful you are for them. You've stopped doing that. You stopped writing cards. You stopped sending flowers. You stopped giving hugs. You stopped kissing romantically. You stopped, seeing them. When you stop seeing somebody, they notice. When you stop appreciating someone, they notice. There's one thing that I pride myself on that I want to share with you because I think it's going to be helpful. My wife and I still, after these 7 years, still say thank you and please. And we still say how grateful we are for each other every single day. I still shower her with gratitude and appreciation. I still say thank you every time she does something, or please every time I ask her to do something. And it's reflected and it's reversed the same way from her to me. And I'm telling you, that makes me feel seen. It makes me feel appreciated. It makes me not feel overlooked. It's acknowledging that they exist. And you just being there isn't enough. Not for long-lasting relationships. And that's what a marriage is. It's a commitment forever, till death do you part. That was our vows. That's what I have to commit to. And I have to find ways to do that. So we got to stop taking granted for each other. We got to stop not appreciating each other. We got to make sure that we show up as our best selves to be able to fulfill their needs, wants, desires, and hopes. So these are the 5 reasons why relationships fail. Number 1, they avoid personal responsibility. Number 2, we oftentimes blame each other rather than taking responsibility for the problems that we bring to the relationship. Number 3, we avoid conflict by not speaking with open and honest communication. Number 4, we stop prioritizing one another. And number 5, we take each other for granted. These are the 5 reasons why relationships fail over time. And the reason why I wanted to share this with you today is because this should act as a reminder for how you don't want to continue to show up in your next relationship. So in your next relationship, you should take more responsibility. You should blame yourself more. You should talk openly and honestly about everything that's on your mind. You should prioritize them, and you should tell them how grateful you are for them. My name is Tylerjoestratton, and this is Honey, I'm Home.